Hello, thank you for tuning in today to the Michigan Merit Curriculum, Flexibility in Awarding Credit, and the Personal Curriculum with Rashell Bowerman from the Michigan Department of Education. We are glad to have you here today. You may find you still have additional questions after viewing this webinar. Please remember that our regional parent mentors are here to support you as you have questions. We are your guide to all things special education. We are totally free parent training and information. We help you understand the federal law about special education, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. We help you understand the state rules about special education, and we help you understand these things like personal curriculum that are general education things that are maybe relevant to your student with an IEP. So do not hesitate to reach out to your regional parent mentor. We have parent mentors across the state that all live where they serve in the state. So they know their local communities, they're connected to information and resources at your local level, and they're there to answer your questions. So please remember we're here for you. With that, I am super excited that we have Rashell with us, and I'm happy to introduce her. Rashell, you want to talk to us a little bit more about personal curriculum today?
All right. So thank you for joining me. I love doing these connections with Michigan Alliance for Families. I think they serve such a great need and purpose across our state. And anytime I can lend support and information and knowledge, I absolutely try to do that. And we are going to record this one, so they'll have it up on their website and whenever they get it processed through there. And that way there'll be a clean recording, which again is why we're going to save the questions to the end. But you'll also leave with my contact information too. So if I don't get to your questions, then there will be an opportunity for you to reach out to your parent mentor or to reach out to me if you have specific questions about the Michigan Merit Curriculum or the personal curriculum. We did this same exact presentation back in October, and I think it was very well received. I got a bunch of follow-up emails and communication, and had a bunch of parents and counselors and other individuals in school districts reach out after that one. So I very much appreciated the opportunity to be able to be in front of that group, which is a little bit different audience than maybe I normally would have in front of a school district or a conference, if you will. So for those of you who are not, I'm going to put the agenda up and there we go. But for those of you who might not be familiar with me or haven't heard me at anything else or a conference or with your school district, I'm Rashell Bowerman, and I've been with the Michigan Department of Education since 2012. My position is in the Office of Educational Supports, and that is where everything sits that's related to the graduation requirements, all of our content standards, so our math consultant, our science consultant, and anything related to high school kind of sits in my office. So my position specifically was intended to be the primary resource or to have that expertise around all things Michigan Merit Curriculum and personal curriculum and all of the flexibility and all of the different facets that legislation brings to us as a state. So that's what I try to do. And that's what my role is at the department, to spend the majority of my time supporting all of our 800 plus school districts in many different ways, whatever that looks like. So all of that to offer myself to your district or your school. If you sit, I know we have a lot of different people with us that probably span many different roles and responsibilities in districts or as parents. But if there's something that I can do for you beyond today or beyond tonight, please feel free to reach out. If you're in a school district and you would like some version of what I'm presenting tonight for your staff or for your leadership, just let me know, and I can certainly try to get that into my calendar. That's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is presenting out in the field and working with districts and different events like that. So don't feel like this has to be the end of our relationship. Hopefully it can be the beginning, and I can hear from many of you just like I did after the event in October. So What I'm hoping to get through today is what you see on the screen. And we were able to get through it with the time we had last time, and we should have plenty of time at the end for some follow-up questions and some discussion if that makes sense. But I'm hoping that we can go through the Michigan Merit Curriculum, kind of that 101, right? And we have to do that particularly with an audience like this, because I know we might have some individuals that don't sit with school districts. We may have some parents on, we may have some different roles and responsibilities in the group. So I want to make sure to set that framework or to set that foundation with the Michigan Merit Curriculum graduation requirements. So we're going to do that first. And then we're going to talk about some of the waiver. There's two different waiver options that are available aside from the personal curriculum, which we'll get to in the second half of the presentation. We'll talk just a smidge about testing out, and then we'll dive into that personal curriculum discussion and talk about that waiver that's available specific to students with IEPs in our high schools. And we'll connect that to the educational development process. We'll look at a student example or a student case study, and then a little bit about process and best practice. So that's a lot to get through, but most of those things are just a slide or two. And just remember that if I don't go deep enough on a topic or a certain slide, just know that that often comes with part 2 of this discussion. When I work with that individual district or that school district, digging in deeper is kind of the next layer beyond today's event or today's webinar. All right, so now we're going to get to the good stuff. So we are going to talk just briefly here about the Michigan Merit Curriculum. So the Michigan Merit Curriculum, when I say the MMC or when I say the Michigan Merit Curriculum, what I'm talking about is our high school graduation requirements. So it actually started with the students who started 8th grade in 2006. So that's when this law went into effect. So any student who was in 8th grade in 2006 was going to fall under these new graduation requirements. And for those of you who may have been in a school district or may have been in high school at that time, you may remember what the graduation requirements were at the high school you worked at or the high school you went to. And the truth of the matter is, or the reality is, that prior to this legislation, prior to this package, this MMC, there really wasn't consistency across Michigan. Every single high school had different graduation requirements. The only state requirement that we had was half of a credit of civics. That's the only thing. So there wasn't 18 credits required. There wasn't even 10 credits requirement. There was only a half of a credit required prior to that graduation class of 2012. So this law was cross-agency, Republicans, Democrats, cross-agency, cross-aisle. This was a huge undertaking by many, many business leaders, education leaders, school board members, teachers, parents. This was a huge undertaking to really create consistency across the state. There needed to be this package to really bring all of our districts together and say, we need to do better, right? We need to require more than a half of a credit of civics. We need to require specific math and specific science and specific ELA. We need to have a better package of requirements than what we had. So this bill did just that. It created the 18 credits that we have in place now. And not only did it create those 18 credits, but it very specifically said what those 18 credits had to be, right? And it wasn't just that it required math, any math, it was way more specific than that. So this was really a big change for the state of Michigan. And it's 20 years, almost 20 years old at this point. And a lot of districts are still struggling to wrap their head around what these graduation requirements mean and how to implement them. And that's one of my roles at the department, is to assist our districts in doing that. So again, this went into effect for that graduation class of 2010. you see under the green little section there, it says class of 2016. Well, the world language requirement was in the original package. It was in the original language, but it had a post date. And I don't necessarily know the exact reason for that, but my hunch is that that was the one that more districts didn't have in place at all. Many districts didn't have a world language department or world language educators. So this law gave schools a few more years to get that requirement in line and to make sure they were able to fulfill that section. So the world language requirement went into effect for the class of 2016. And then up until this next year, there were no changes to the Michigan Merit Curriculum. The Michigan Merit Curriculum has been consistent since 2006. There have been no credit changes to this law. Now, that all did change last summer, and we're going to talk about personal finance just a little bit later on. And if you have questions about personal finance, you can certainly reach out to me. We're not going to go in depth about it because I really tried to keep this event focused on the personal curriculum and students with IEPs. But if anyone has any questions about personal finance, you can reach out to me, and you can also find information on the high school site, which is going to be shared in another slide. So just a brief timeline of what has transpired in Michigan with our graduation requirements. And again, the main thing I would bring forward is that they really haven't changed. They've really been very consistent since it was passed in 06. The only thing that's changed or been amended slightly was some further flexibility options. No credit changes, but there have been a little flexibility pieces built in as time has gone on. So this document is one of the handouts, this one pager that you see on the screen. This is a handout that you have access to. I shared it with the materials. It is a document that's just a simple one page, very succinct. I often call it the MMC cheat sheet because it's just that easy document for individuals who want that easy glance at what the Michigan Merit Curriculum is. So this is the MMC one pager. And I want to talk about this just for a second and make sure that we're all on the same page about what the graduation requirements are. So if you look at this document, there's a bold heading for each content area. So it says, I'm just going to talk about the top, working my way down. So if we talk about the top one, it says English Language Arts, ELA, 4 credits. So that's the first requirement that's listed, ELA, 4 credits. And then underneath that is how a student is legally required to earn that set of credits. In this case, the English in ELA 4 credits. So it says proficiency in the state content standards, right? And I bring that up because all of the requirements in Michigan are basically patterned in the same way. They all read the same way. They all use the same language. They all say, here's how many credits you need. Here's how you earn those credits. And all of them say proficiency in something. So we're going to talk about what that means, but I just want to draw attention to because we're not going to talk about each content area today. We just don't have time to do that. But you know, from the dialogue that they all work in exactly the same way. A student earns credit in the same way, whether we're talking about science or whether we're talking about math or ELA. So what is important to mention, and this is still surprising to some people when I say it, right? So I'm going to go back to ELA because it's on the top. The first thing to mention is that credit under this law is not based on time. So you will not see the word years in any of the requirements that we have in Michigan. It's not 4 years of ELA. Time is irrelevant to this law. What does matter is what's underneath that bold where it says proficiency in the content standards. So that is the key. A student has to gain proficiency. Some people use a different term for the same thing. Sometimes I'll say mastery, sometimes I'll say proficiency or competency. Whatever the word is, it all means the same thing. They learned it. right? So in order for a student to earn the 4 credits for ELA or the 3 credits for science, they have to learn something. And that something has been decided in this law, right? So it's not just any English, it's not just any science, it's very specific to the content that we've adopted as part of this law. So the first thing is about time. Time isn't referenced here. Time isn't relevant to the requirements. So it's not 3 years of science, it's 3 credits of science based on learning those standards. The other thing, the second bullet on this slide that's important, is that there are no courses listed here. And it's still surprising to some people when I say Algebra 2 isn't a requirement in Michigan. It's never been a requirement in Michigan. We don't care if students ever sit in a class called Algebra 2 or biology or ELA 10. Districts decide all of that. Districts decide what courses they're going to offer and what courses they're going to use to embed the actual requirement, which is the standards. So that is a big shift in how we operate and how we operated prior to this law being passed. So it's not about time and it's not about courses. It's about proficiency and it's about the students learning. And once they can prove that they have learned a chunk of the required standards, that's when they should be given credit. And I'm going to go into a couple more just to kind of bring this idea home. But I want to point out that I did link for you the high school page. So it's michigan.gov/high school. And on that page, you will find an FAQ that says everything that I'm saying right now. It will say Algebra 2 isn't a requirement, right? It will say that time is irrelevant. So you'll find an FAQ there. You'll find several other resources. You'll find information about everything I'm talking about today. So I always want to share that high school site in every webinar I do, in every event. So I'm going to blow up this section. So this is the same document. I just snipped out the credit section. So again, you can see that each area, ELA, math, PE, health, science, they all work exactly the same way. They're all given a credit amount. And then underneath that, it says proficiency in something is how a student earns those credits. So we're going to talk specifically about science just for a second. And I'm hoping I can give you a good example that might help to really cement this idea of it not being about time and not being about courses, but being about content. So we're going to talk about science. So what you see on your screen right now is what I want you to really focus on right now is the gray square. The gray square is the only thing on this page that has to do with the requirements. So the gray square is the requirement in the state of Michigan. The triangles, we're going to talk about them in a second. But the gray square says MMC Science Standards. There are 71. Science was the first area that I went to college for, and I love science. That's probably why I chose it. But there are 71 high school science standards, right? So there are some standards around ecosystems. There are some standards around matter. There are some standards around chemical equations, right? There's some standards around space systems. So there are 71 standards, 71 topics, 71 bits of information, 71 things that we require that students learn in Michigan, all 71. They have to learn, they're supposed to master or gain proficiency on all 71 standards to be able to earn the 3 credits. That right there is where this law kind of ends and districts have to take over. So this law decided the 3 credits. The law made us adopt content, which we did as a state. We adopted national standard sets. We used the Common Core for math and ELA. We used the Next Generation Science for science. And those are the requirement. So now let's talk about the triangles. So on this slide, you're going to see one triangle this is a very traditional course model. So some of you are going, yeah, that looks familiar. That's what my son or daughter is doing right now, or that's what my school does that I work in. You may have one class called biology or life science that covers some or a chunk of the standards. Fine. So if a student takes biology, they learn some of the 71, they can earn a credit there. Student takes chemistry, they learn some of the standards, they earn a credit there, and they do the same thing with physics. Well, if I add those up, they earn a credit in each. If I add the numbers up, it equals 71. That is how a student could earn the 3 credits. But that is not the only way. That is only one way. And students don't have to sit in these 3 classes. They could sit in 3 other classes, or they could earn some of the credits in CTE or right? There's a lot of ways that students could earn the credit. So let's look at one more example of how some districts are already doing it in Michigan. So in this model, a school covers all of the 71 standards in 2 years. They have one class called Integrated Science A. They have one class called Integrated Science B. Each class covers half. Each class would be worth a credit and a half. Fine. At the end of the day, the only thing that this law cares about is that the students got to the requirement, which is the gray square, which is the 71 standards. So whether a district does this, they can do that, or whether they do this, I don't have an opinion or preference over. It is up to that district, and it should be up to the needs of the students and the community to make sure that they're doing the right thing to get students to meet the requirement, which is the 71 standards. Now I'm going to go one step further. Here's another example of how districts could break up those 3 credits. So if you see the pink box says CTE embedded. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. An example would be the health occupations program, or the culinary program, or the automotive program, right? So in this example, a student takes, we'll just use health occupations, right? In this example, a student takes health occupations and they learn a chunk of the 71. They learn 20 of the 71. They can absolutely earn a science credit for that, but that is up to the district. The white triangle says test out. Testing out, and I have a whole slide about testing out, but in this example, a student tested out of one of the science credits. The student didn't want to take biology. The student came in and they said, I don't want to take biology. I looked at the book, it looks too easy. I think I know it all. The school has to say, awesome, show us. So they set the student down, the student takes an exam or an assessment or does a project. They show the school that they know a chunk of the standards, and that is how they would earn that credit. Awesome. So the green triangle then, to round out this example, the green triangle is an example of a course that covers multiple subjects. It may cover math and science in the same course. Fine. We actually really love those examples of integration. So each of these examples, traditional, more integrated, shorter sequence, or this example, all of them get us to the same outcome. Each one of them is no better or worse than the other. It's just a different way to get to the actual requirement, which is the learning of those 71 science standards. So hopefully that example was able to really set that foundation of what the Michigan Merit Curriculum is and what it isn't, and show that the intention was that there's a lot of different ways that students can learn science and math and ELA and arts, and a lot of different ways that they could show that they've gained that mastery. And all of them are equivalent as long as they get to the 71, as long as they get to the learning. All right, so what we're going to talk about next is we're going to talk about the 2 waivers that are available for all students. This is not a student with an IEP thing. This is not a transfer student thing. This is a all student option to waive MMC requirements when it makes sense. And this is not part of the personal curriculum. That's coming in a minute. But this is talking about two different waivers that we have that are built into law. And they don't require a personal curriculum, but they are options to waive a part of the MMC requirement. So let's talk about the first one, which involves science. So this one is showing you that students have options, which is the whole premise of the Michigan Merit Curriculum. It was not meant to be one size fits all. It was not meant to be all students doing the same thing for 4 years. That's actually the opposite of what it was meant to do. It was meant to give districts flexible options. It was meant to give students flexibility. It was meant to really allow students to do the things in high school that they need to do in order to get them ready for what they want to do after high school. That was the whole premise of and the reason that the MMC was built. So let's talk about the first waiver. It involves science. So as you can see from the slide, students basically have two options. They can either, just like I showed you in my example, they can either earn all 3 credits by learning all 71. That's option 1. Awesome. They learn the 71, they earn the 3 credits. Check, check, check. Perfect. Or they have another option. They can earn 2 credits instead of 3, and they can gain proficiency in 2/3 of the standards, whatever that number is. So 2/3. So if we're talking about courses, if a student goes that route, they may only take biology and chemistry. They may waive physics. They're not going to earn that credit. They're not going to learn those standards. They can do that under this waiver. They can only do that, though, if they are on that career in tech ed pathway. They have to be in a CTE program, and they have to finish that program in order to use this waiver. So the options are you learn all 71, you earn the 3 credits, or you complete a CTE program, and that allows you to waive one of the 3 credits. Now, remember, when I say waive, I'm not talking about they learned the content in a different way. That's not waiving. I'm talking about the school district took a chunk of the required 71 standards and threw them away for this one student. The student is not going to learn them, so they're not going to earn that credit. That's one of the waiver options. The second waiver option involves the world language requirement. So for world language, we require 2 credits, not 2 years, not Spanish 1, Spanish 2. We require 2 credits in any language that exists other than English. So students, again, have 2 options. They can either earn 2 credits in another world language. They can earn those 2 credits, or they can earn 1 credit and waive the other. And again, they can do that by being a CTE, Career in Tech Ed program completer, or with world language, the law actually added on one other substitution, which would be an additional art credit. So a lot of students are only earning 1 world language credit because they're taking an extra art credit. And this flexibility allows students who may not need to learn another language as much because they're not going to a 4-year university, or they are going a different pathway, right? They're going down a vocational pathway, or maybe a community college pathway. So this flexibility is there to give students different options for what they do during high school in order to prepare them for what they want to do after high school, which is kind of the whole point of high school. To prepare students for what they want to do after high school. So those 2 waivers, again, are flexibility options given to students in the law to allow them to make some choices. Should I take Spanish 1 and Spanish 2? Or should I only take Spanish 1 and waive the other credit so that I can get into a CTE program or so that I can take an additional art credit? Those are flexibility options built into the Michigan Merit curriculum. If you have questions about either the MMC or the waivers, please put them in the chat. And then when I wrap up here, I'm going to go to the questions and get through as many as we can. I just want to make sure that we have a clean recording for the webinar. So I see that I'm saying that because I'm seeing the number go up in the chat, but I'm not going to look in there because I'll get very distracted if I do. So put your questions in the chat and I promise I'll get to as many as I can at the end of today's webinar. All right, I'm going to continue on. So I did link for you, if you open up this PowerPoint presentation that you received or that's linked on the Michigan Alliance for Families website, if you click on the blue testing out title, it's going to take you to the testing out FAQ. That's a very user-friendly, real language document that really explains what testing out is and what testing out isn't. So I wanted to link that for you. And I just wanted to mention just a couple things about testing out. And then again, if you have questions on testing out, feel free to put them in the chat and I will address them at the end. So testing out is, again, another piece of flexibility built in to the Michigan Merit curriculum, right? It's in the same law. Everything we've talked about today falls under the umbrella of the Michigan Merit curriculum. And testing out is a right that students have to say, I don't want to take that class, right? I don't want to take geometry. I think I know that math. I don't want to take Spanish 1 or Spanish 2. I already know another language, right? Testing out is the right that students have, all students, 100% of students, to earn credit without having to take a class, right? They just have to show that they know the content and they have to be able to demonstrate it, right? We need that actual real proof that a student knows it. So I'm going to give you an example that might help. This is actually an example that I got over within the last couple months. So I had a student email me and the student said, I took some, over the summer, I did some classes or I did some Khan Academy and, whatever, it doesn't matter what they did. But the student said, I really want to test out of English 10, right? They're like, I'd like to skip it. I'd like to go right to English 11. I'd like to test out. And I directed them to they have to go back to the district. There's nothing I can do for testing out. It is an individual district decision about what the assessment is. The district gets to decide what that test looks like. The district gets to decide when the student takes it, but the right is in the student's hands. So I directed that student what to do, but in my mind, best practice would be that student would walk into the counselor's office or walk into the principal's office or find the testing out form in the office. And that student would say, I want to test out of English 10. Right? And at that point, the district has an obligation. The district has a responsibility to say, awesome, I'm glad that you think you're advanced on ELA. I'm glad that you think you know that content. Let's find out where you're at. So the school may schedule a time for that student. They may have a testing out window. They are allowed to do that. But the student does have the right to be given the ability to sit down and take an assessment that the district builds. And if they get a C+ or better, that's what's in law. It says C+ or better. If they get a C+ or better on that final exam or on that test or on that project or on that essay or on those 10 quizzes, whatever the district decides to do, then if a student gets a C+ or better, the district has to, by law, give them that credit on their transcript. That student does not have to take that class anymore. They earn the credit. So in a nutshell, that's what testing out is. And a student can test out of any MMC credit or all MMC credits. There isn't a limit to how many they can test out of. And there are students that are able to test out of the majority of the MMC. And there's nothing wrong with that. If they can do that and if they can show proficiency, I want to give them credit. I want to be able to get them on to harder content or get them their diploma if that's what it means. So testing out, it's a right that students have. They can test out of any MMC requirement, but there is a lot that's under district authority or district control. This is the website that I shared with you. This is just a screenshot of the first page or the home page of the high school site. So I just wanted to show you a couple things on here that might be useful, particularly if this is a newer message for you. If some of this information is like, wow, I didn't understand that that's how the requirements work, or that's not how we're doing it in our district, right? Some of those things, I want to just point out some resources that might be helpful for you to look through to gain even a little more clarity about what this law really says. So I'm going to just point out a couple things. So this is the bottom. This is that same web page. This is the whole page. This is just the bottom blown up. So I'm going to point out three different documents or sections that I think will be helpful. So the green arrow is pointing you to an FAQ. And it used to be, even though this is an older screenshot, it doesn't say updated 2017 anymore because it's been updated way more frequently than that. Over the summer, I took it out of a PDF and I put it into a web page. So now it's an FAQ page. There's a tab for math. There's a tab for earning credit. There's a tab for world language. So hopefully that FAQ, that's where I direct parents. That's where I direct people that are new to secondary or new to high school. I say, go just spend some time in the FAQ. Check out the tabs. And I think you'll get a lot of your questions answered in that document. Down a little bit lower, the orangish one that says all standards, that is pointing to a link that will take you to a page that has every single K-12 academic standard that we've adopted. So if you're curious to know what those 71 science standards are, you can find them there. They're all there for you. You can read the health standards, the art standards, the math standards, every single standard, the second grade ELA standards. You can find every standard at that link. And remember, those are the actual graduation requirements, the standards, the Common Core math standards, the Common Core ELA standards. Those are what we require for students to master before they leave us with that diploma. The yellow arrow is pointing to the PC page, and that is where all the personal curriculum stuff, resources, guidance is housed. So if you came tonight mostly to hear about the personal curriculum, that might be a page that you want to check out and maybe dive into a little bit. There's more, the testing out is up here on the top. And so there's more information on this page, but I just want to point out those pieces. All right. So this is the point in our time together, and we're right on time. So I'm proud of myself for that. We're right on time where I wanted to be because this is about the halfway mark. And this is where we're going to change gears, right? We talked about the graduation requirements, right? We talked about the waiver options that are not PC, talked about testing out. We talked about the standards. It was important to do that because now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about the personal curriculum, which is the tool that we have that allows you to mess with everything we just talked about, right? It allows you to remove or waive MMC credits. And there are different rules for different types of students. And we're going to really try to stick mostly to students with IEPs. But it was important that you all understood that you're not removing Algebra 2, right? There is no PC for Algebra 2. There is a math. You can modify the math requirement. You can remove a math credit, which might mean the student isn't ever going to take Algebra 2, right? But Algebra 2 is not what you're actually removing. You're actually removing a credit and you're actually removing math standards or science standards. So I just wanted to make that clear and make the connection between the first half and the second half. All right, so the PC, or the personal curriculum, has a bad name. I've always thought it had a bad name because it really doesn't have anything to do with curriculum. They shouldn't have named it personal curriculum. I wish they would have went with something simpler, like an MMC waiver, because that's really what it is. The personal curriculum is just a tool. It is a waiver that allows you to remove part or parts of the MMC requirements. But in doing that, it does change that number 18 to a different number. So if you remove a math credit for a student, you are changing their 18, MMC 18, you are changing it to 17. That is the number they would graduate with, 17 MMC credits. It doesn't mean they still can't earn 21 or 24 or whatever the district requires. They absolutely can, because you're going to fill in what you remove with other experiences and other credits. But you have legally changed the number 18 to another number. And that is what a PC does. It's really the only thing it does. So if you use a PC for any student, you are changing the MMC in different ways, and you are lowering their MMC credit number. This is huge flexibility. This allows students and districts to help students in removing credits that they don't need and filling their time and space with things that are better for them, with different courses, with different experiences. So if a student, here's just a very general example. And this is all dependent on the student's post-school plan. I will always ask that question if we're talking about a student. I will say, what is this student planning to do after high school? Because without that information, we can't even talk about a PC. There is no PC without a pretty concrete educational development plan, transition plan, course of study, all of that. So back to my example. So student A wants to go to a auto mechanic program after high school. That's their plan. They want to finish high school. They're going to go to career and technical education, and then they want to go to a diesel mechanic certification or credential. I don't know if college is the right word, but training program, right? So they're planning on leaving high school, going to a diesel mechanic program. Does that student need to take Algebra 2? Does that student need to learn that math? I don't get to have an opinion on that, but I can give an example that says, you know what, if that student is going to leave high school and go to a diesel mechanic program, a 2-year program, I can almost guarantee that that program doesn't require Algebra 2 or doesn't require that high of math. So one way to use a PC would be to say, okay, we're going to remove a math credit. We're going to remove math content that the student will never learn, and we're going to replace that time with something that makes sense. Maybe they're going to take longer to get through the other math, or maybe they needed a year of acceleration or remediation, right? Maybe they were behind when they came to high school. Whatever the reason is, that's how a PC can be helpful. It can remove that math credit and allow that student out of that class or out of that MMC requirement and allow them to do something different with that time. That is the whole purpose of a PC, to remove something they don't need and replace it with something that they do need. That's what a PC can do. But we have to play by the rules. So what I'm showing you right now is the 4 different types. We're not going to talk about all of them. We're actually only going to really talk about one of them, the third one down, the one that's for students with IEPs. But I just want to make it clear that this tool, this waiver, this personal curriculum is not just for students with IEPs. There are ways that every single high schooler in Michigan could use a personal curriculum. It's not appropriate for every student. Certainly every student shouldn't have one, but there are options that could work for every single student in a Michigan high school. So these are the 4 different types. The first one is called enrichment. The next one involves only math for general ed. The third one we're going to dig into today. And then the fourth one involves transfer students. So if you are interested in learning more about the gen ed or the students without IEPs, PCs, please feel free to reach out to me. I can shoot you a different PowerPoint presentation that has all of them embedded, or we can schedule some time to chat. Just let me know what would be useful for you. But for today's purposes, we're going to talk just about that third one, the one that's the green, the greenest one on the slide. So this PC type is for students with IEPs only. So only students with IEPs fall under this specific section of law. It's actually section K in the whole big MMC law. And it's the one with the most flexibility. So if a student has an IEP, they can potentially modify any MMC credit requirement. And again, this goes back to the district. The district has to make this decision. It is their diploma. So parents do not get to make this decision. This is a district level decision as to who gets a PC and who does not. The district has to decide if they're willing to remove MMC credits and still give a diploma. They don't have to. The personal curriculum is an optional district tool. They are allowed to say, no, you have to meet all of the MMC to get our diploma. They are allowed to say that. I don't agree with that stance at all, but I just want to make it clear that this is not part of IDEA. This is not part of special ed law. This is general ed law. This is an optional piece of flexibility that students can get if a district approves it and if a district allows it. So I just want to make that very clear. So like you can see the content, I'm not going to read it to you, but if they have an IEP, you can potentially modify any MMC requirement. So any of the 18 that we just talked about. So you could have a student that removed a math credit. They're not going to take algebra 2. They remove a science credit. They're never going to take chemistry. They're going to remove the world language requirement. They're never going to take Spanish 1 or French 1 or German 2, right? You're going to remove those 4 credits. A student could do that and a district could approve that and say, you know what? We know they're going to be ready for whatever they want to do after high school. We've left in all the stuff that's important. It aligns with their IEP. It aligns with their EDP. Check, check, check. That is a feasible plan for many students, right? But that's completely up to the district to decide if they're going to approve a PC that has X number of modifications. So the good and the bad of this type of PC is that it allows anything, right? It allows any modifications, but that also can get a little dangerous, right? That can get a little dangerous because at some point we have to start questioning if that student should be on a diploma track at all, right? Should they be working towards a diploma or should they be working towards something else? The certificate of completion. The personal curriculum is like the median, right? It's the middle ground between diploma and certificate of completion. So that's actually what my next slide says because I want to make sure to hit this example. So the personal curriculum for students with IEPs is for those students that should be on a diploma track, but we need to remove some things to make it make sense. The certificate of completion is also still relevant in Michigan, and there are still many students who benefit from a certificate of completion. So I don't want to make it sound like the personal curriculum will do away with certificate of completion because it absolutely will not, and it shouldn't. Just a personal example. I have a son who's 21. He did not get a diploma. a diploma would have been harmful for him. He has a cognitive impairment. He's pretty high functioning though. He's reading and writing and doing math at a 6th grade level, but he needed transition services. He needed those 18 to 26 services across Michigan in the county that we live in. So for him, a diploma wouldn't have made sense. A PC, a personal curriculum, wouldn't have made sense. You would have had to have removed every MMC requirement in order to keep him on a diploma track. And that's just not appropriate. It's not appropriate for my son. And I would argue it's not appropriate for any student to remove all of the Michigan merit curriculum and still hand out a diploma. We have to remember that in Michigan, the diploma stands for something. It stands for career and college readiness. So if a student gets a diploma in the state of Michigan, it has to mean that they're prepared for what's coming after high school. It has to mean that they can go to community college and do well. They can go to a 4-year college and do well. They can go to a trade school and do well, right? They're reading and writing and doing math at a solid high school level. That's what the diploma in essence means in Michigan. So I just want to point out that the personal curriculum is an awesome tool. It's a great option, but it doesn't replace the need for some students to earn a certificate and to be able to continue on in our system. I'm going to show an example now, and I'm going to just be quiet for about 45 seconds, and I'm going to let you read about student A. All right. So this is kind of an easy peasy kind of example, right? This is kind of a straightforward example. I don't see too much controversy in this one or anything like that. This is kind of a softball, right? But I wanted to give you an example of a pretty straightforward way that a district could use a personal curriculum. So in this example, the student has an IEP. They have a specific learning disability, and the student has a plan. The student has a plan for after high school. They want to go on to be a certified auto mechanic. They want to go to a local community college to a 2-year program. That's what's in their transition plan. That's what's in their educational development plan. So based on that information, the school has built a personal curriculum that removes some things, right? So in this example, and again, I'm not saying that this is best practice or this should be the standard PC, not at all. This is one student and an example of what a district could do, right? So based on this transition plan, they have decided, the PC team, we're going to talk about the team in a second, but the team has decided, along with the family and the students and other representation, that they're going to remove a math credit and 2 world language credits. They're going to remove 3 MMC credits, remove them. They're gone. They're thrown away. They have changed this student's 18 to 15. 15 is the total number of MMC credits that they're ever going to earn. They're going to replace that time and space with electives and with other credits. So they're still going to hit the district total, but their MMC number is different. So with a PC, they removed those 3 credits. Student is not going to take Algebra 2 ever. Not going to show up on their transcript, not going to learn that math. It's gone. Why? Because they don't need it. That math is not relevant for that student. The math that is taught in that class is not going to help this student become a certified auto mechanic. Right? Not going to happen. So the school decided we're going to remove that. They're never going to take Algebra 2. They're never going to earn that math credit. They also removed the world language credits. Why? Same reason. The auto mechanic program doesn't require that the students earned credits in world language. And this student doesn't have an interest in learning another language, and they would rather spend their time doing something else. So in this example, they removed 3 credits total, 1 math, 2 world language, meaning that they're not going to take those courses. And this has to be done based on what those first 2 bullets are talking about. What does the transition plan say? What is this student planning to do after high school? And even if the district approves this one, we file it away, we change their schedule. If this student changes their mind, if this student comes back their junior year and says, I don't think I want to do auto mechanic anymore. I think I want to go to Michigan State to take some courses. If that happens, the school has to respond, and the school might have to redo the PC or completely void that PC based on that student's new plan. So that's why it's very important to have that EDP and that transition plan on lock, right? Not that kids can't change their mind, of course they can. But in order to remove things, you want to make sure that that student has made the best decision for themselves at that time, and that they're not really wishy-washy about that plan. Yes, they can change their mind, but we want to only remove things that truly align with what their post-school plan is. I'm going to go forward. So the next two slides are really more about the process and procedure. Now, this is often the next step beyond the intro, right? So the next step is that I would work with a district, I would work with a leadership team, I would work with a school at what their individual process and procedure looks like, because it looks different at every single school. But for this group, I thought it was relevant to at least mention the things that are in law and that are required of a district. So that's what's on this first slide. So it says when a PC is requested, a PC must be developed. Remember, it doesn't mean it's going to go into play. It doesn't mean it's going to get approved, but it does mean that the district has to take action. So if a parent, and this is huge for you all on the call that are parent advocates and work with parents, if a parent goes to the school and says, I'm requesting a PC for my child, for my student, that district by law is supposed to at minimum do a couple things. They're supposed to go into action. That student may never get a PC. They may never get approved for one, but the district at least has to take a couple steps to follow the intent of the law. And those couple steps are that, I'm going to skip down to the third bullet. So one of the big things, or one of the only things that a district has to do, is to develop the PC, and they have to develop that PC with a team. And I've included the individuals in that bullet that have to be involved in the team. It has to be the parent, or guardian, the student when it's appropriate, counselor or teacher, or counselor and teacher, just depending on the situation. And then if it is a student with an IEP, it's very highly recommended. It's not a legal requirement, but it's highly recommended that you involve the school psychologist, someone that would be able to give input about that student's levels, abilities, and have some input on these decisions. And then after the PC is developed, still nothing is in place yet, nothing is approved, because until the superintendent or their designee, whoever they designate, sometimes it's a principal, sometimes it's a school board, sometimes it's a counselor, someone has to sign off at the district level. Someone has to approve. And until that happens, there is no PC. So someone from the district has to have the authority to say, yes, going back to my example, we're going to remove 3 MMC credits, but we're going to do that because we know it's the right thing for the student. We know we're not removing anything they need. We know this puts them on the right track. Sign, sign, sign. But until that signing or that approval happens, There is no PC. So if the superintendent denies the PC, meaning that they say, no, I don't agree with this, I'm not going to remove 3 credits and still give them a diploma, deny. If they deny it, it's dead. There's no grievance process, there's no due process, there's no mediation. This is general ed law. So it is only up to the district if it gets approved or denied. The other thing that is required of districts in schools, high schools, is that they're supposed to put PC information on their website. Wherever they decide to put it and whatever they decide to put is up to them, but they're supposed to have it visible. And then they're also supposed to provide some type of written PC information to their parents annually. From my experience, a lot of times it'll be in that handbook that parents get once a year and they have to sign that they received it. If the PC information is in that handbook, that would follow this section of the law. But it's up to districts how they want to comply with that. So this slide is the must do's. These are the things that are in law that districts are supposed to do when it comes to the personal curriculum. This slide is the should do's. This is not required. Not even going to say it's best practice, but these are the things that are really more up to district authority, district control, district option, district choice. So forms. So many of you, like myself, with having a child with a disability, I'm used to special ed law and I'm used to schools having to do certain things. And I have to remind myself that this isn't that, right? So districts should have a form, but there's not a specific form that they have to use. Do they have a request form in the office? They could, but they don't have to. That is completely up to a district. Do they have a form that has an actual signature? They could, but they don't have to. That's completely up to a district, what their forms look like, what their process and procedure look like, who's on the team within those roles that are required, record keeping, annual update, educating staff. All of those things are the should do's, not part of the legal requirements. Those were on the slide before. So again, I just want to offer myself to districts. If the last 2 slides, if that's where you're at as a school, if that's what you really need help and support with, digging into the process and procedure, helping to align your handbook or your information, those are things that I can absolutely support districts with. They just have to reach out to me and ask for that support. So I'm going to go to the questions in a second, but I'm going to just point out that this is my email. So that's the best way to get a hold of me is my email, Bowerman R1, don't forget the 1, at michigan.gov. That's the best way to ask me a question. Even if you want to get a half an hour phone call with me, start with email and just say, hey, I'd love to have a half an hour of your time to ask you some personal curriculum questions. I will get you on my calendar in the next week or 2, I promise. The phone numbers are there as well. I'm not often in my office in Lansing because I'm bouncing around the state, but I do have a work cell. And I answer it as long as I'm not in a meeting or whatever. So those are ways to get in touch with me. If we don't get to your specific question today, you can reach out to me and do that. I'm going to put up.
Thanks, Rashell, for all that fantastic information, and thank you for tuning in. As I told you at the beginning, if you have additional questions, do not hesitate to reach out to your regional parent mentor at Michigan Alliance for Families. You can reach them through the 800 number, 800-552-4821. Also, lots of information at your fingertips 24/7. So if you want to check out our Facebook account, our Instagram account, or other videos in this YouTube library, please feel free to explore those at your convenience and our website, michiganallianceforfamilies.org. Again, thank you, Rashell, for sharing the fantastic information, and thank you for tuning in. Have a great day. Michigan Alliance for Families is an IDEA grant-funded initiative of the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Special Education, and Michigan's Federal Parent Training and Information Center, funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. Have a good one.